All right, hello and welcome to today's video where we're going to be talking about how we balance having compassion for people who are all hurting, right? Everyone has their history, everyone has things that they've been through, which means that we all have blind spots. We all have places where we're going to hurt one another, where we're going to have, toxic or bad or hurtful behavior, and we're going to hurt one another. And learning how to have compassion for where someone is coming from and the fact that they are likely not hurting you on purpose, or that they're going to have issues with, healing their stuff, and being able to have healthy boundaries and to protect ourselves and to not become just doormats where we're like, okay, well, because I have empathy and because I understand that, you're not doing this on purpose, you have childhood trauma, you have issues from your past, whatever it is, because we can understand that and because we can see that and because we can have empathy for that, we don't want to become the kind of people who just let anyone treat us however they want, or, hurt us and harm us over and over and over again. And we just make the excuse of like, well, I understand that you're traumatized, or I understand that you've been through hard things, and therefore I forgive you every single time, right? And this can be a really difficult thing to navigate. This can be a very difficult balance to strike when we are highly empathic people, or when we are people who can understand that, people aren't choosing to hurt us a lot of the time, that people aren't choosing to have their kind of negative habits or whatever it is, that we can see and we can understand that people have gone through things and they have habits that they're going to need to work through. And like, we can understand this even about ourselves, that we are not perfect human beings, that our past influences how we treat people, that we are going to make mistakes and we are going to make the same mistake usually over and over and over again. And learning how to forgive ourselves and learning how to be kind to ourselves, while also being open to the idea that we might have things that we need to change and that we need to shift in order to create healthy relationships. So, this is what we're going to be talking about today. How do we balance having empathy for people? How do we balance having that compassion for what people have gone through and knowing that they aren't hurting us on purpose, with the capacity to have healthy boundaries so that we don't just end up getting hurt over and over and over and over again? So, this is one of those conversations where I really want to start by saying there are no hard and fast rules when it comes to relationships. And so many people who are in the kind of coaching, spirituality, self-help, personal growth world who talk about relationships and that they make this their career, they can come across a lot of the time like there are very specific rules that we need to follow in our relationships, and that by following these rules, these very specific rules, we are going to have perfect outcomes. That we are going to be able to create perfect masculine, feminine dynamics in our romantic relationships, and that this will create the perfect polarized love. That we, should have very, very, very strong boundaries in our friendships, or that we need to be gentle and empathic and understanding so that we don't run people away. And there are a lot of people out there that, again, preach this idea that there's this kind of gold standard for how to behave in a relationship, and that gold standard will give you the absolute best chance at having perfect, relationships where we never get hurt, and where we never hurt others, and where we aren't set up to have these big vulnerabilities. And the real truth of the matter is there are no perfect relationships. There are no hard and fast rules. There is no way to perfect ourselves into a state where we only have perfect relationships. And there's no way of getting to a place where we can just follow a certain set of rules and have a perfect relationship. Okay? There are definitely tools that we can gain and understanding that we can have during our lives that help us improve the state of our relationships generally overall. There are communication tools that we can use. There are things that we can do that will create, like I say, healthier communication, healthier expression. There are things that we can understand about ourselves that create a situation where the relationships that we enter into and the way that we relate tend to be healthier than what we may have done in the past. But overall, right, because we are constantly changing dynamic beings, and the people that we are going to be relating with are constantly changing dynamic beings, and because we do not have perfect self-awareness, because the people that we are relating with are never going to have perfect self-awareness, because we all have histories and blind spots and things that are going to come up that we didn't expect, relationships are always going to be something that we're working on. Okay? And so I really want to start this video by just saying that if you can relax the idea that there's a perfect way to relate, if you can relax the idea that there's a way of perfecting yourself so that you will never get hurt in a relationship again, if you can relax the idea that we are ever going to find a perfect partner or a perfect friend or a perfect coworker or anything like this, and that we are always going to be in a state of learning when it comes to our relationships and how best to relate. This can usually be the most relaxing approach that we can take to relationships, and it can take a lot of the pressure off of feeling like we need to figure it out and feeling like we're failing if we are struggling in our relationships. Because relationships are difficult and relationships are challenging, and especially if you are neurodivergent in any way, if you have any kind of past trauma, if you are the kind of person who has historically struggled with relationships, if you're an introvert a lot of the time, we are going to find that there are struggles in the ways that we relate that might not be present for other people who don't have those things. And again, humans are complicated. We are complicated. Other humans are complicated. And there's no perfect way of figuring these things out. Okay? So I really want to start the video by just going with that first fundamental understanding. There is no perfection in relationships. There is no getting it perfect. There is no blueprint for the perfect relationship. And there's no set of rules that we can find that if we just follow them perfectly, we will have perfect, healthy relationships all the time and we will never struggle again. Okay, so if anyone's trying to sell you that, if anyone's trying to tell you and to convince you that relationships can be figured out perfectly and that we can arrive somewhere where we never get hurt again, or where we never hurt someone again, or where we have perfect safety in our relationships, they are lying, because that's just not how reality works, right? And this is, again, kind of sponsor, in the mystery school. So much of the work we do in the mystery school is learning how to understand that there's no gold standard for life, and that we're never going to get to a place where we have perfected ourselves or perfected our understanding of something to the point where we never struggle again, to the point where we never have issues ever again. Rather, we are going to continue to learn to support ourselves. We are going to continue to learn to support our growth. We are going to learn to continue to understand that everything is going to be evolving and changing, and it's going to be dynamic. And we are going to come to a place of understanding that what was once totally acceptable to us may one day become something we can no longer tolerate. We may come to understand that what was once something we couldn't tolerate becomes something we can be okay with. That we are dynamic, changing beings. And rather than looking for the rule book, or rather than looking for how we can perfect something, rather than looking for how we can perfectly protect ourselves from ever being hurt, or how to be the most empathic, caring, loving, most healing, giving person in relationships ever, we want to move from a place of self-support. Okay? that so long as we are moving from a place of like, okay, who am I right here, right now? What do I need right here, right now? What do I have access to right here, right now? And how can I combine all of these things to show up for what's happening in my life right here, right now, to the best of my ability? That is always the foundation we want to be working with if we want the best results. Everything is dynamic. We are dynamic. We are going to be changing. The people we relate to are always going to be changing. And that is super important to understand. Okay, now, at the very core of this, especially with the people who probably follow this content, number one most important thing for you to understand: unless you are someone's actual caregiver, in the sense that you are their parent or you have taken on some legal responsibility to be someone's caregiver, I want to really make this clear. You do not owe someone your compassion and your empathy to the point of self sacrifice. You never owe anyone your empathy and compassion to the point of self sacrifice unless you are legitimately in a state where you are someone's legitimate legal caregiver and you cannot leave and you need to be there for them, and how they behave and how it affects you, that's a different dynamic than when you are an adult interacting with another adult who you are not responsible for. Okay? Your empathy and your capacity to empathize with somebody, I really want to emphasize this as something to think about. If it is causing you to go into a state of self-sacrifice, to a point where you are not willingly choosing to go into that self-sacrifice, where you are not eyes wide open, this is something I need to sacrifice, and I'm doing it for the sake of doing it, knowing that I'm doing it, and knowing that it may not give any specific result. You do not owe anyone that. Okay? Just because you are deeply empathic, just because you understand that someone has been traumatized or they have been through some really shitty things, just because you can see where someone's behavior is coming from, and you can see the innocence behind it, and you can see that they are not trying to hurt you, if someone is continuing to hurt you, if someone is continuing to harm you in a way that requires that you lower your boundaries, that you don't set a boundary, that you forgive over and over and over again, that you make excuses for them, this might be some area where you want to question why you believe you need to sacrifice yourself for this person. Okay? And a lot of the time, we are going to find that the reason we are in a state where we are allowing somebody to harm us over and over and over again, and we are reaching for, yeah, but I understand why they're doing it. It's not their fault. I see their trauma. I see their innocence. There are two things under that we might want to look at and consider and go a little deeper on. And this is not an all-inclusive list or an exhaustive list, but I would say these are probably two of the more common reasons we might find ourselves going into a state of self-sacrifice and not putting up a boundary and not asking for change behavior and using our empathy as kind of an excuse to allow someone to hurt us and harm us over and over and over again. And that is, number one, we don't feel like we are worth anything better. A lot of people who are spiritually inclined, who are empathic, who are able to see the innocence in others, are coming from a place of having been deeply hurt, are coming from a place of having been deeply unloved. and have histories of being hurt and harmed and possibly abused, and self-esteems having been trashed, and people have a sense that they are not worthy of better love. They are not worthy of better care. And there's a fear that if we put up a boundary, or if we walk away from someone who's hurting us and harming us over and over again, that there's never going to be love again. That we are then going to be alone forever, that this is the best we can do, that this is what we deserve because we're not actually that much better anyways. And we might have all of these kind of fear-based stories that tell us that we are kind of deserving of this, or that we shouldn't expect anything better. And that if we were to set a boundary for ourselves, if we were to stand up for ourselves, if we were to say, no, you can't keep treating me this way, even though I understand that this comes from pain or that this comes from your past, it's still not a good enough reason. It's not an excuse for you to continue to do it. We fear that that's going to lead to us being alone forever. We fear that that's going to mean that no one is ever going to love us again, that this is the best we can do. And that is the first fundamental thing that I really want to invite you, that if you kind of notice this in yourself, that you are allowing people to treat you with less than respect. You are allowing people to walk all over you. You are allowing yourself to make excuses for people's past or present behavior because of their past and because of their trauma and because you can see the innocence. And you have a deep resistance to setting a boundary. You have a deep resistance to standing up for yourself. You have a deep resistance to saying, no, you can't keep doing this, even though I understand where it's coming from. I really want to invite you to consider, is there a part of you that believes that you are not worthy of better than this? Is there a part of you that believes that you are never going to find better love anyways? That this is the best that you're ever going to get? And if so, I just want to say right here, right now, that is not true about you. Even though I know that I don't know you, even though I know that this is a parasocial relationship, right? If no one has ever told you before that you are worthy of being loved and respected, that you are worthy of being in friendships and partnerships and relationships in general, where the people around you are capable of seeing where their stuff is causing harm, and the people around you are capable of saying, even though I can see that this comes from innocence, even though I can see that this comes from the fact that I was harmed or I wasn't given tools in relationships or whatever it is, it's coming from innocence, that's still not an excuse for me to continue to do it. If you don't believe that that is true for you, that you are worthy of relationships with people like that, I really want to say, yes, you are. Okay? And I want to invite you to do some work with yourself on healing and having compassion for these parts of you that were told that you don't deserve better, that were told that if you put up a boundary, you're going to be abandoned, or you're going to be told that you're too demanding, or that you're being unfair, or the blame is going to be turned back on you. You may have had these experiences over and over and over again of trying to set a boundary and being told that you're being demanding, or that you are unfair, or that there's something wrong with how you're doing things. And that is not okay. That is not okay. You never deserved that. I am so sorry that you went through that. And it is not true that that is the best that you deserve and that you should accept that behavior. Okay? Just because someone has a reason for why they are harmful, just because someone has been through shit, has been abused themselves, has been traumatized, had a shitty childhood, whatever it is, just because someone has been hurt or harmed and is then hurting and harming because of that, is not an excuse that they should be able to continue to do that for the rest of their lives without anyone ever saying, you can't keep doing this. Okay? Awareness of why we are doing what we are doing. Awareness of innocence, that everything we do does come from innocence. Everything we do and everything everyone else does. We can understand this as empathetic, caring, understanding how human psychology beings, as we are these beings, we can understand that everyone is doing their best, that everyone is doing whatever they're doing because they are just trying to get their needs met from their current place of understanding, their current place of capacity, based on what they've been through. We can understand that. We can have empathy for that. And we can balance that with the awareness that that is not an excuse to keep living that way. That someone might choose to use that as an excuse to keep living that way. Someone can say, well, my trauma is the reason I am like this. But you do not then have to continue to sacrifice yourself because that person is choosing not to grow. Because that person is choosing not to change. Because that person is choosing not to be better for the people around them. They're bleeding all over you, a person who did not cut them. And if they are not choosing to do the inner work, to shift and change that, you do not owe them sticking around because you can see the innocence. Okay, so that's that first thing. Where do you believe that you are not worthy of something better? Where have you been shown that you are not worthy of something better? And how can you start to show up for those parts of yourself with love and compassion? To start to heal them and nourish them and support them and let them grieve and let them be upset. Instead of rushing to a state of premature forgiveness or rushing to a state where you believe that it is your job to be eternally forgiving, eternally accepting, eternally understanding, with, again, the underlying assumption that if you are not, you're going to be abandoned and no one is ever going to love you again. I am so sorry you went through that, and you deserve better. And I really want to encourage you, watch my YouTube videos, join the mystery school, get therapy, get a therapist, work with somebody that can help you learn to love yourself enough that you are able to set boundaries and that you are able to see that you are deserving of being around people who are capable of understanding that they are hurting you and changing, no matter how innocent the root of that hurt is. So that's number one. If your fear of putting up a boundary is coming from, I don't deserve better, this is all I should be able to ask for. No one will ever love me if I set up a boundary. People have gaslit me or blamed me or turned it around on me when I've set a boundary, and it's just not worth it. That kind of stuff is painful. And I'm so sorry that you've been through that, and you deserve the space and the time to work through that, to learn to love yourself, to learn to respect yourself, to learn to see that you do deserve better, because you do. Okay, so that's number one. And number two, it's very common for empathic people to believe that it is our responsibility to love somebody better. That if we keep loving somebody, understanding somebody, being there for somebody, supporting somebody, forgiving somebody, seeing the innocence in somebody, that if we keep being there and if we keep sacrificing ourselves for them, we keep letting them cut us and then being like, I forgive you, I understand, I'm going to be here for you, I love you, all of this, we can start to believe that it is our love and our support and our undying, unwavering love, unconditional love, that's going to change them. And that is the second thing that I really want to invite you to consider, may not be coming from a healthy place. Again, unless you are someone's legal caregiver. When you are an adult interacting with another adult, it is never your job to give somebody unconditional access to you and unconditional love in the sense that they can treat you however they want to treat you. They can do whatever they do, and you are always going to forgive. You are always going to make room for them. You are always going to make it okay. You do not owe anyone that. And your love is not going to be the thing that changes somebody. As an adult who is loving another adult, you do not have the power to shift somebody out of a state of trauma and causing harm and repeating their patterns with your love. You do not have the capacity to unconditionally love somebody the way that their caregivers never did, or in a way that a loving caregiver is supposed to, as an adult to an adult. That's not your job, and it's not possible. You need to understand, we all need to understand, that while we do want to love people, and while we want to have compassion for people, and while we don't want to be the kind of people who say, okay, you have to be perfect, otherwise scorched earth, right? We want to have reasonable expectations of human beings, knowing that people are gonna fuck up, they're gonna make mistakes, they're gonna hurt us, we're gonna hurt others, we're gonna know that we're hurting others, we're gonna repeat our patterns. These things are going to happen. And we want to be in relationship with people who are able to take ownership from that, who are able to say, yes, I see this, I see what I'm doing, I can hear you when you tell me that my pain and my trauma is causing me to act in a way that is hurting and harming you. And rather than them defending themselves, or rather than them going into a state of groveling and grieving and, oh my God, I'm so sorry, and please don't leave me, and it's my trauma, and all of this stuff, they need to be able to say, okay, I hear you. I can see again that what I'm doing is not coming because I'm a bad person. I can see that what I'm doing is because of my history and the things that I've been through and my trauma and my pain and my past. And I want to do better. I want to be better. We want to be in relationship with people where they are not relying on your unconditional love as a source, where they are not telling you that if you abandon me or if you leave me or whatever, I'll never recover. That they are not saying your love is the love that's going to heal me. And where you are not putting it on yourself, that your love is going to be the love that heals someone else, because it isn't. As an adult to another adult, it is true that our love can be a lovely adjunct, a lovely support, a lovely thing that we offer to someone who is healing, to someone who is doing their own inner work, to someone who is looking for that source of unconditional love from within themselves, and realizing that as an adult, we are never going to find unconditional love from another adult who is not our caregiver. That is not a reasonable expectation, and that is not what healthy adult love is. If we are not in that dynamic, I really want to set you free right now, if I can, by letting you know that it is not your job to love somebody well. It is not your job to love somebody safe. It is not your job ever to love somebody unconditionally to the point where you are sacrificing yourself in the hopes that this will be the thing that heals them or transforms them or provides the platform for them to do their healing work. People have to be willing to do their own work. People have to be willing to see how their trauma and their past and their hurt is affecting the people around them. And they need to be taking responsibility for that. That's what a healthy dynamic is. So a healthy dynamic is one where we can stand up and say, look, I totally understand that you were hurt and you were harmed. That the way that you are behaving right now is not because you're a bad person. It's not because you're evil. It's not because you're stupid. You're either just unaware, you were hurt in the past, you're doing your best to get your needs met, you're bleeding on me even though I didn't cut you, you're projecting, whatever it is. And we can help bring awareness to these patterns. We can help people see where they're maybe not seeing it in themselves. But then it is the other person's job. It is the other person's responsibility to say, okay, I am going to do the work that I need to do so that I don't continue to be this way. I need to be able to take responsibility and apologize and say that I'm sorry, and to be able to own that without going into shame, blame, and guilt and that whole spiral as a way of kind of being sometimes manipulative, right? Like, I'm so sorry, this is my trauma, I promise to never do it again, I'm so sorry, I'm awful, I'm horrible, why would you even be with me? Or why would you be my friend? And this thing happening over and over again, like when we tell someone that they're hurting us and they just make it into this big dramatic, I'm so sorry, please don't leave me thing. Or they defend themselves. Or again, they make promises that they're going to change and then they don't. You do not owe anyone your unconditional love and presence. You are allowed to walk away from someone who does that without feeling like you let them down, and without feeling like you abandoned them, and without feeling like you are going to be the reason they never heal. You are not that important. And as much as that can feel shitty to hear at times, it's a healthy thing for us to realize that. We are not that important. We are not that vital in someone else's story. And if someone is going to continue to stay in their trauma and to stay in their shitty behaviors, they will find someone else who will put up with it. You can move on and you're not going to be the reason. They just never heal. Because at the end of the day, as adults, our healing is up to us. Just how we don't want to look to anyone else to unconditionally love us and to perfectly support us and to perfectly be there for us and say that we can't heal and we can't grow and we can't be okay until they do that. We never want to put ourselves in a position where we think we have to do that in order for someone to heal and grow and change. And if anyone's ever said that to you, if people are saying that to you, you have to love me. If you just keep showing up and if you just keep loving me, that's going to be the reason I heal myself. Red flag. You don't owe anyone that, and that's not true. Your love is not going to be the thing that heals someone, and your lack of loving somebody or stepping away or putting up a boundary is not going to be the reason someone doesn't heal. People heal because they decide to heal from within themselves. It is a personal responsibility as an adult to heal and change. So if somebody is not showing you through their behavior that they are working on changing, so it's true, right? People are going to come into awareness that they're doing something shitty. that their stuff is hurting someone else, and they hopefully are able to avoid the pain, the shame, blame, and guilt spiral that just keeps them trapped in it, or the defense, pretend it's not happening, blame it on you, and they're able to see it, and they're able to understand it, and they're able to say, okay, yeah, I can see. I have empathy for myself. I understand why I'm doing it, but I'm not going to use that as an excuse to keep doing it. And then I'm going to go on a process of healing and changing where I'm going to fuck up. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to hurt you again. But I'm going to, every time that happens, offer a real repair, offer a real apology, and I'm going to be working on it. That behavior is going to be happening less and less and less. Real shifts and real change are going to be happening that you can actually physically see and experience in the relationship. If that is not happening, if it's all words and no action, or if it's all self-blame and shame, or blaming you, you are allowed to walk away. You are allowed to put up a boundary. It is not your love that is going to heal them. You are not responsible. Okay? So, you are worthy of someone who is able to be aware of their shit, to be aware of themselves, to be aware of their blind spots and how they are hurting other people, and who can take responsibility for that and do the work they need to do to heal, where they are not dependent upon you and your love and your continued self-sacrifice for them to be able to do that. You are worthy of that, and you do not owe anyone perfect love in the hopes that this is going to be the thing that transforms them. It is up to every individual as an adult to choose to heal or not. Okay? So those are the fundamental things that I want you to consider when you're thinking about, do I move from empathy or do I move from boundary? Yes, you can have empathy. Yes, you can communicate. Look, you're hurting me. Here's what you're doing that's hurting me. Here's how it's hurting me, and here's why it hurts me. And you can communicate it in a way that's non-combative, that's compassionate. That's like, look, I see. I know why you're doing this. I see your history. I know you're not a bad person. I'm not blaming you. I'm not shaming you. I'm not saying you're evil. I'm not saying there's something fundamentally flawed with who and what you are. But it is not okay for this to continue. So what are we going to do to remedy this situation so that this stops happening? And if the other person is not able to meet you there, to go through that with you, you do not owe them your presence or your love or staying. Okay? And I want you to do the work, to know that you can be maybe alone a little bit. Maybe you can lose somebody's love and be okay, if that love is going to be continually something that asks you to sacrifice yourself. Some of us do need to learn to be a little bit more independent. Some of us do need to learn that setting those boundaries and saying no and holding a higher standard for ourselves, that may mean we are a little bit more maybe isolated or alone, or having to learn to be a little bit more self-reliant, is an okay thing, and that we can do it, and that it's healthier to have boundaries than it is to have presence and a warm body that continually, like I say, asks us to sacrifice ourselves for them. And then on the flip side, some of us do need to learn how to soften our boundaries a little bit. Some of us do need to learn how to allow people to be imperfect human beings, just like how we are imperfect human beings, and to make room for that, right? That people are gonna fuck up. They're gonna forget stuff. They're gonna be negligent sometimes. They're going to be shitty, just like we are, right? We are going to fuck up. We are going to be shitty sometimes. We are not always going to have the ability to communicate in a loving way. We are not always going to be able to not project our shit onto other people. We are not always going to be self-aware enough to know that we're causing issues. And so long as we're the kind of people who are doing our inner work, that we can take feedback for where we're hurting and harming others without going into shame, blame, and guilt, which is why that is like a huge, big bulk part of what the mystery school is and what I do in my coaching work, is teaching you how to not get stuck in the shame, blame, and guilt spiral where you believe that you're just a flawed, awful human being. Because all that does is keep us stuck in our shit. All that does is keep us stuck in our patterns. That does not help us be able to see, okay, it's not my fault. It's not my fault that I have a blind spot. It's not my fault that I was traumatized. It's not my fault that I was not taught healthy ways to communicate. It's not my fault that this is the best I know to do to keep myself safe right now. That we can see that, and that we can balance that with, but that's not an excuse to keep being this way. I'm going to do the work that I need to do so that I can be better for myself and better for the people in my relationships, right? We can forgive ourselves for the things we did in the past because we understand why we did them, right? So if we're continually saying like, you know, I made these big mistakes in my relationships and I hurt people, and rather than being able to say, okay, I see why I did that. It's not because I'm evil and wrong and bad and horrible. I did it because I didn't have any other skills. I didn't have any other awareness. I didn't know what else to do. I felt trapped. I felt angry. I felt whatever I felt, and I didn't know how to communicate it. I didn't know how to get out. I didn't know how to stand up for myself, and I did an abusive, horrible, terrible, shitty thing. We can have empathy and compassion for that. And then we can learn to say, okay, so what do I need now in terms of learning and skills and healing to be able to be different in the future? We want to hold ourselves to that standard so that when we are in relationships, we can be in relationship with people who are also able to hold themselves to that standard. I can see why I'm doing it. I can see the innocence. And I'm willing to do the healing work so that I don't keep doing it. And again, some of us need to have a little bit more patience for others, right? It's not, okay, well, you fucked up one time, so goodbye. Or you have a flaw, or you have a blind spot, or you have a thing that's, you know, a quirk or a thing that's not great, a shitty behavior. And so this is where we get into that territory of we are adults and no one can tell you what is right for you or what is wrong for you. Okay? So what might be to one person a deal breaker? I can't stay in this. This feels like abuse to me. I've run to the end of my rope with patience, or having this conversation over and over again and not seeing change. What might be someone's, no, this is the end, this is a deal breaker, maybe to somebody else something that they feel they can handle. And so nobody can come to you and say, you have to leave, this is abuse, or you have to stay and give them another chance. Only you can decide where your line is. And I don't think anyone should be able to tell you that your line is wrong if that's your line. So when we're dealing with shitty behavior, right? And of course, I'm always going to advocate. I'm talking about shitty behavior. If you are being genuinely abused, if you are being made to be physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, financially unsafe by somebody over and over and over again, I am always going to advocate that you figure out a way to get out, that you ask for help. And I know that getting out is not always easy, that there isn't a straightforward line. Okay? I get that. And so what I want to just say to you is, again, please reach out for support. If you are in physical danger, if someone is putting you in a position to be emotionally abused over and over and over again, if you are constantly being told that there's something wrong with you, that you are the problem, that it's never the other person's fault, if you are in a situation where your self-esteem is being continually eroded by this other person, you deserve to get out. You deserve help. Please reach out for that help. I'm always going to advocate for that. You do not ever deserve abuse. Nobody ever deserves abuse. Nobody ever deserves abuse. And no matter how much someone is trying to convince you that you are deserving of it or that it's your fault, it's never your fault that someone abuses you. It's never, ever, 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 ever your fault that someone abuses you. If someone is telling you, you made me hit you, you made me do this, you made me abuse you, no, you didn't. No matter what you do, you never deserve abuse in return. Period, end of story. So I want to make that very clear. When we're talking about legitimate abuse, you deserve to just leave. You deserve help to get out. And again, this might be one of those situations where it can be gray and fuzzy sometimes. What one person thinks is abuse, another person can just think is shitty. And so, right, it's hard. But I think the main thing is never let somebody tell you that what feels like abuse to you isn't. I think we just need to err on the side of caution. And if you feel like you are being abused, validate that and do what you need to do to protect yourself. Okay? I don't know that we should be gatekeeping what abuse is or telling people you aren't being abused because, it is true. It is absolutely true that a lot of the time, especially in this self-help, spirituality, personal growth kind of world where psychology terms have been normalized, we can call things narcissism that are just, forgetfulness. We can call things abuse that are just people being shitty. And so we don't want to water down the experiences of people who are being legitimately abused by calling everything abuse when it isn't. There is a such thing as just shitty behavior. There is a such thing as just shitty dynamics. And it does not rise to the level of abuse. And that can be something that, again, we determine for ourselves. Is this worth putting in the work? Is the other person putting in the work? Is this worth whatever it is I have to sacrifice to be here, to wait for it to be better or to work towards something better or not? And at the end of the day, nobody can make that decision for you. You have to decide for yourself what is worth the effort and what isn't. And at the end of the day, like I said, there's no guru, there's no boss, there's no coach, there's no guide, there's no book that can tell you what you should tolerate and how long you should wait, or what you should walk away from or not tolerate. That's a dynamic thing, that you just need to keep checking in with yourself for what you value and what is okay with you. And like I said, keep working from a place of knowing that you deserve safety, that you deserve someone who is able to take responsibility for themselves the way that you are willing to take responsibility for yourself. You deserve a reasonable level of self-awareness from the people that you're with and a reasonable level of safety, right? So we're not asking for perfect love, because that's never going to exist. We're not asking for unconditional love, because that's never going to exist. We're asking for good enough. And again, only you can decide for yourself what is and isn't good enough. So with this kind of talk, if you were to believe that you are worthy of good enough love, if you were to believe that you are worthy of someone who is able to take responsibility for themselves, who is able to learn and grow and shift along with you, who is able to forgive you when you're gonna fuck up over and over again, but you're doing your best to be better, and that you are able to forgive when they fuck up over and over again, but you can see that they're doing the work to be better. If you were to believe that you're deserving of this kind of relationship in your romantic relationships, in your friendships, in your coworkers, whatever it is, and if you were willing to believe that it is not your job ever to be someone's unconditional source of love and presence, it is never your job to have so much empathy for somebody that you will put up with anything, that you will tolerate anything, that you will make an excuse for anyone for any behavior. If you were willing to understand those two things, what would be the most supportive thing that you can do in your current relationships? If those are your two platforms, where do you want to go from there? And again, last thing, I know this can be, again, very complicated because power dynamics exist, right? Like when we're talking about our relationship with our bosses or our coworkers, or even people who have, right, if we are in imbalanced relationships with partners and maybe they have more financial control than we do or whatever it is, this can get messy and this can get complicated, right? Just standing up for yourself or wanting to take your power back and all of these things can be legitimately dangerous and compromising. And I want to validate that, and I want to say that I understand that those circumstances exist. And I am so sorry if you are ever in a situation where the power dynamic puts you in a situation where you have to tolerate shitty behavior in order to keep yourself alive or in order to keep a paycheck or in order to keep yourself safe right now. And that's not okay, and you don't deserve that. And again, I really want you to approach that from a place of self-love and compassion and knowing that you don't deserve that, and then showing up for how much you can support yourself within those conditions, asking for help where you can find it, and knowing again that you never deserve that. Because again, right, there are no hard and fast, cut and dry, simple solutions to really complex situations sometimes. But we can always start with having compassion for ourselves, having grace for ourselves, building our own inner sense of self-esteem and self-worth, which can be really hard when the people around us are continually chipping away at it. But you deserve to be loved and respected. Even if a power dynamic exists, you deserve to have people who are not willing to take advantage of that. So please work from a place of just self-support. and showing up for yourself and doing the best that you can for the you that exists within the conditions that exist without blaming yourself for those conditions. Because again, most of us, we don't willingly put ourselves in a shitty power dynamic. It happens because of the ways that our society is set up. And that's not your fault. And you deserve to be loved and supported. Okay? So, hopefully this was helpful in how can we learn the balance of boundaries and love. No one can tell you what the right answer is. You need to work from a place of loving yourself and supporting yourself, and then deciding for yourself what is and isn't worth it, what is and isn't okay with you, what you are and are not willing to tolerate, knowing that you are not responsible for anyone's evolution. You are not responsible for being anyone's perfect love or perfect caretaker that they never had, and that you are allowed to set boundaries, and that you can be alone and probably be more independent than you think you can be, and that you are worthy of people who are able to admit where they are causing harm and are able to work on it. Okay? So again, we can learn how to communicate these things in loving, compassionate ways. We don't have to sit there and blame people. We don't have to sit there and shame people. We don't have to be the kind of people that are like, you fucked up, so scorched earth. Right? Balance. But balance. And also being able to say, hey, I realize that you're traumatized. I realize that this isn't your fault. I realize that this is from your past and all that stuff. And it's become too much for me. Or I'm willing to be here with you so long as you are doing your inner work. Okay? That's what we want to strive for. That's what we want to aim for. That we love ourselves enough and we love others enough. That we can grow and change and do better together. Okay? Okay. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, leave them down below. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any topic requests, leave those down below. I always love the conversation. I always love the feedback. So there you go. You want to come join the Mystery School? I would love to have you. One-on-one coaching, you can find that in my link tree in my Instagram. And other than that, I hope you have a beautiful week, and I will see you next week.